Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video. This one's a little bit interesting. The restructure is now starting to take place, and it was always going to be interesting to see whether Lopetegui, once he is officially announced, was going to bring in his own staff. Many people suspected he would, and it does look like that's going to be the case. But there's also quite an interesting restructure upstairs as well as to how the transfers are now going to operate and how the current setup will continue to push on in terms of recruitment and transfers. So if we take a look at this first tweet, obviously Rob Newman has now left West Ham. He was brought in originally to the head of recruitment role under David Moyes, but there is no place for him with Lopetegui coming in and Steidten being in charge of transfers. So I guess that's the first point is, Rob Newman was brought in, had this huge CV, former Man City scout and recruiter. It was a big change for West Ham at the time. It was probably the first change we had in a long time towards a positive transfer recruitment strategy. And I think Rob Newman did a pretty good job during his time at West Ham. I think he went under the radar a little bit. I think he could have done better, to be honest. But by and large, he did a pretty good job. And, he made some very smart signings during his time at West Ham. But it looks like Lopetegui and Steidten are just going to be full force now with Mark Noble as well. So on the transfer side of things, it looks like it's going to be an interesting switch up, and it puts a lot of pressure now on Tim Steidten and Lopetegui to get this right in the summer, because it's a massive rebuild, it's a massive restructure at the club happening. So it's going to be interesting to see how they battle that with the departures of David Moyes and his staff, and also now Rob Newman as well. So we're going to be someone down in the scouting department, but looks like Tim Steidten is going to pretty much have full control now, which is interesting. There was also this as well, which is around the backroom staff in and amongst the club at the moment under David Moyes, whether they would be staying, whether anyone would actually be staying on in the coaching role. That doesn't look like it's going to be the case as we bring this up here. Kevin Nolan, Billy McKinley, John Heitinger, and a few other first-team coaches have been dismissed by the club following Moyes' departure. Lopetegui will be bringing in his own staff to replace them. So that's pretty much confirmed now. It's a fresh start. There's not going to be anyone staying. It really is start from scratch and see what we can do now and try and build this summer, whether that's from the squad, whether that's from the coaching staff, the whole system, the whole style of how we're running and operating is changing. And I think, looking at someone like Tim Steidten now, massive, massive, massive opportunity for him to not stake a claim, because he's kind of already done that, but prove himself now to the West Ham fans and the West Ham board that he can get this right and he can do it by operating by himself. It's also going to be interesting to see where Mark Noble sits with all this, because we are very much aware that Mark Noble has a huge impact on the academy and the younger talent coming through at West Ham. So where's his focus going to be? How much of an impact and how much of a say is he going to now have on transfers? Because it's slightly different. I think Steidten and Noble have always been on the same page in terms of how they want to recruit and the style of where we want West Ham to go in the direction of this football club. I think that's very, very clear. And I think Mark Noble has probably done a very good job of telling Tim Steidten exactly what West Ham fans want. And I think, Steidten's wise enough to see it. The back end of Moyes' tenure hasn't been, pretty. And, we needed a change in direction. And I think that's why we've let Rob Newman go as well, because he was also brought in under Moyes. So it's kind of, just a fresh restart for the club to reset, rebuild, and see how we can structure going forwards, because it is a big job for Steidten this summer. I think we've said it countless times on this channel. It's a massive rebuild. We did a video a couple of weeks ago looking at the squad right now and assessing where we're going to need to prioritize. But truth be told, it's pretty much all over the place. It really is. There's not really like a one or two position specific improvement where you're trying to improve the first team. We're trying to improve the first team, but we're also trying to improve the squad at the same time, because that's been our biggest issue the last few years, is actually the depth and the quality and the depth in our squad. So for me, this is probably the biggest summer we've had. I know we keep saying it every summer, but this really is the biggest summer, because we're no longer in Europe. We've had that for 3 seasons now. That's gone. How are we going to attract players when we don't have the Europe pool? And B, how are we going to hold on to players like Kudus, Paqueta, Bowen when we don't have that luxury? So, you know, recruitment's one side of things, but keeping your best players is another side. I think Lucas Paqueta, I think most West Ham fans would accept him departing the club because it would raise a significant amount of cash to reinvest in the squad for the summer. But also it would, I think if you could pick one of those three out of, Bowen, Kudus, and Paqueta to go, you're probably going to pick Paqueta because he's the most easily replaceable and he's the one that hasn't been showing the form recently. So that one's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think there's obviously two sides to the transfer strategy. With Rob Numu going and Tim Steidten kind of taking full reins of that, and also importantly working with Lopetegui. I think that's something that is very crucial to this component. David Moyes and Tim Steidten didn't particularly get on. They didn't not collaborate. They just weren't on the same page with the direction the club was moving in, which is, a big part of why David Moyes has been let go of his role at West Ham. So that's going to be a massive side. But you've now got Lopetegui, who is willing to work with a technical director. He believes that, there's quotes from him before where he believes that is the best policy, working in tandem with someone to achieve a goal. As long as you're clearly aligned on the strategy and the focus, then absolutely go for it. And I think they will have that. And I think they've probably already discussed that, in the initial talks and, the onboarding with the contract. So from a transfer perspective, everything we do this summer will be aligned. I'm 100% behind that belief that there's not going to be any kind of, conflicting spaces now. It's going to be Lopetegui, Mark Noble, Tim Steidten. We're going to push forwards. We're going to be on the same page with these signings, A, B, and C in each position. Let's try and get this done. That's, the basics of it. I think that's how it's going to operate. You've then got the coaching side, which is the second part of this, which is, there are some very influential figures behind the scenes in the coaching staff. Kevin Nolan was a massive part of that. Billy McKinley as well. There's been a lot of big authoritative figures within that dressing room and within that setup of the squad. So that's also going to be a slight change. It's not only David Moyes that's gone out and Lopetegui that's come in. It's a complete restructuring of the coaching staff, the behavior around the club. The culture of West Ham is now changing. It's all things that don't really get spoken about because, everyone's mainly fixated on the transfers and, building a squad that's going to get us back into Europa League, Champions League, blah, 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 blah. But it's also very important that we acknowledge that there's going to be a big change in the culture at West Ham, and there's going to be a big change in how things are done. And, those things do take time to adapt to. So some players will be on board with it. Other players won't. That's just how it is. And it may be that some of our better players don't get on board with it. And some of our, underperformers, should we say, see a massive improvement. So it really is going to, depend on how Lopetegui wants to set up and how Lopetegui wants to approach matches. But, we've done our breakdown on here on Lopetegui and what he's going to bring to West Ham. And I'm sure when he's appointed, we'll talk in more detail again. But we have to align now. I think that's been the biggest issue the last couple of seasons is that alignment has been missing. Tim Steidten came in last summer. He's now been here a year. It's now time for him to show West Ham fans what he can do. And, there really isn't any excuses anymore because he's got a new manager, someone that he said he likes and he wanted to bring to West Ham. And now he's got the transfer strategy in his hands. He is the one that's going to be leading that with Robin Newman now departed. So it's going to be interesting. I think for me, what this restructure should be is clear direction. That is the 100% the thing we need. It's just clear direction and that being kind of communicated, not just to the club, but to the fans. So, we're very much aware of the direction West Ham are heading in. Obviously, there's going to be, details that aren't disclosed into the public, but we should be able to see from the coaching and also the transfer strategy what type of direction West Ham is going in as a football club and whether Lopetegui is going to be a success here at West Ham and whether Tim Steidten could build something and build an environment with his transfer strategy that's going to, give us the platform to push on as a football club. Because yes, we've now haven't got Europa League. We've taken that kind of little bit of a step back. We do have money to invest in the squad. It's a massive rebuild. It's a massive task, but it's also something that should excite the likes of Lopetegui and Tim Steidten because they're now coming into a project where they can start to mold it how they want to. So, I think for me, time will tell with this. It's definitely an interesting one. But yeah, it looks like it's a clean sweep. You know, the only one that really stayed there is Mark Noble. And, you know, you'd expect him to because he's a slightly different role of sporting director and, you know, he's heavily involved in the academy and stuff. So, yeah, fresh coaching staff coming in with Lopetegui. Rob Newman's gone. So Tim Steiden's taking the reins as head of recruitment now. And Mark Noble obviously will continue to work in tandem with the other two and also a focus on the academy. So, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on this restructuring. Are you excited? Are you optimistic going into the summer transfer window? Because there is a lot of work to do, but it's a completely new direction, and we should see some changes very, very imminently at West Ham. So, yeah, if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, and until next time, come on, you Irons.